Hello, everyone, and welcome to another issue of the Presence Posse Presents. We're here, it's me, Miriam Siegel, Jan Hart, and Bobby Cobb, and we're here to talk about trauma as opportunity. We thank you for being patient with us. We have had some technical issues with sound. As you can hear a little bit, there's a bit of rustling in this and that, and we hope that you just continue to bear with us because we think the topic will be very interesting for you today, no matter what. So I just thought I'd start with Jan. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself before we get into the topic?
Sure. I like to call myself a peace of mind practitioner. And the people that I tend to spend time with are those that are challenged with busy minds, overthinking, and tend to suffer from overwhelm. So I take people on a journey to cultivate calm and find a quiet space within where they can tap into a reservoir of resources that are available to them to help them navigate life in an easier and more graceful way, I guess. And a lot of that is about presence and about being present and staying in the present moment. So tonight's topic is fascinating, and I know it's one close to your heart, Miriam, and look forward to hearing everything you have to share.
No stage fright now.
Not you, never.
No, actually not. Thank you. Bobby, would you like to let people know who you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm Bobby Cobb. I work with organizations and individuals looking for similar outcomes and results that Jan just shared, but I come at it from a hypnotherapeutic standpoint, working with the unconscious mind and increasing conscious and subconscious communication so that they can work together and really resolve limiting beliefs and debilitating mental constructs that just hold us back from experiencing our true, authentic self.
That sounds lovely. And I'm just a pretty face.
Yeah.
I'm a psychotherapist. I am a relational mindfulness facilitator. What in heaven's name does that mean? I will probably say a little bit about that as we talk. But it basically means that, actually, a kind of an interesting picture that some people use, I'm not sure if I like it, but I can try it out, is instead of meditating on your breath or meditating on a candle, you meditate on the other person and yourself at the same time.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's basically being present to yourself and the other person at the same time at all times. And I like to ask the question, what's it like to be you here with me right now? I can see you thinking already, Bobby.
Yeah. What's it like to be here as
What's
you
it like to
with
be
me?
you? What's it like to be you here with me right now? Because there's a big difference between what's it like to be you and what's it like to be you here with me. What masks do you put on? What kind of reactions come up? How do you interpret what I say or how I look? Actually, you want to play a game, you guys?
Sure.
Opportunity. Since the topic is trauma as opportunity, we don't have to really be into trauma, but as a sort of relational mindfulness exercise. So sentence stem, we repeat a sentence stem and we complete it. So if I'm, for example, with Jan and I say, as I sit here with you right now, I notice, or I'm noticing, it's even more present because presence is always in movement. So I'm noticing, and the game is, I'm noticing something completely specific, something that I can see, or I can notice, I can feel maybe, but something completely specific. So, and watch what happens if you notice adjectives, some evaluations coming in, or how specific can you be? So as I sit with you right now, I'm noticing you have white hair. and you can't answer. So the idea is now, you say, as I sit with you right now, I'm noticing, and you can say it to either Bobby or me, Jan.
Well, Miriam, as you were speaking and I'm sitting here with you, I was noticing the glow on your cheekbones.
Thank you. So I noticed that, I hear you say, I was noticing.
Well, I am noticing.
I am
I
noticing.
notice.
The glow
I do
on my
notice.
cheekbones.
I am noticing.
Very subtle shift, but that's one
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
small hinges that swing big doors.
Yeah.
Yes. And
And
so,
Bobby,
and
I
just a question
noticed your
about that.
chuckle.
Wait. You don't get to get away with that yet, Jan.
Oh dear. Okay.
What is glow? Well, how do you know it's glow? Because you're describing something. What is specific? What do you actually see?
A shine.
Okay. A shine. Is it light? Is it
A brightness.
mm-hmm.
A brightness. A lightness. A rosiness.
Okay, rosiness, yeah. Do you notice that it becomes suddenly slightly more challenging?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you were going to say something to Bobby.
I'm noticing, well, I'm not noticing right now, Bobby. I was noticing your lovely chuckle.
My lovely what?
Chuckle.
What do you know? What are you noticing right now?
I'm noticing that Bobby looks like he's trying to keep a straight face.
Impossible. Try and find that you cannot.
So the relational aspect here would be, how do you know? So because I hear an interpretation of what you see.
Yeah.
Right? So in a relational mindfulness context, and this is an opportunity, because with trauma, we will, now I'm generalizing, I'm including myself in this, we will tend to interpret or be frightened in some way and even manipulate or try to hide. Not because I noticed there was a bit of time when I asked, what are you noticing? And then there was this time lapse before you said something, Jan. And I thought, what's happening? What's going on with you right now? Are you trying to find something interesting? Are you trying to be, is there what's going on? And that's where the trauma is, the opportunity becomes getting a hold of what's going on right now. What am I thinking? What am I telling myself? I can't just say, I'm noticing you have glasses on.
Yeah.
Why not?
I was looking for words to verbalize what I wanted to say. What I was noticing was that when you asked me what was I noticing about Bobby now, it seemed to me like Bobby sat up and said, okay, look at me and what do you notice? Because his jaw set all of a sudden and your lips were closed, and they're rarely closed. Your face is not a still face, Bobby. Your face is usually in motion. It's very alive. That's how I see it anyway. And for you to sit there with a still expression on your face looking back at me, that's what I interpreted as you were trying to keep a straight face. Mm-hmm. Because you're very animated normally. Mm-hmm. And I love that aliveness. And stillness of face is not something I would associate with you. Stillness of energy, yes, and of beingness. But your face is alive and moving, usually.
Yeah.
So if we were going to do this relational mindfulness exercise, I would start asking you what's going on with you right now, Jan, as you're talking. Right. And see what came up. And again, with trauma, it would be possibly that you didn't want to tell me because you were afraid of what I would think or do, for example. Now I'm making this up, of course, but just as an example of the opportunity to, okay, and actually put words to that. I'm terrified. I'm afraid you're going to be mad if I say, or I'm afraid to hurt Bobby, so I don't want to say
Mhm.
For example, I notice you have some white hair on your chin. If I think that's going to hurt Bobby's feelings, or I'm noticing you have a line in your forehead right there. If I think that's going to hurt Bobby's feelings, I might not want to say it, for example. But then I'm not in the present. In relation to Bobby, I'm in the future thinking about what he might do or how he might interpret what I say. Whereas my real intention might be, I am just noticing that he has a line right here, or that he has white hair here, or whatever it is, right? And that's an opportunity to learn, where do I jump the gun? When do I live in the past or the future?
Mm.
What happens that has me wanting to give another impression than the one I think I'm going to give? For example, like if I say you have white hair and I don't want you to think I'm a bad person, so I wouldn't say it. Or can I find the right word so I don't hurt your feelings? Or this is nothing about what any of you did.
Right.
This is just examples.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's just examples of how to work relationally mindful. It's being present to what happens when I'm with you at every moment and when you're with me. So since I suddenly realized that saying relational mindfulness practically every time I'm on the presence posse, and does anybody really know what I'm talking about? And since the topic is trauma as opportunity, it was a good, it felt like a good time to actually say a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
Because trauma can take us away from the present and being who we are in the moment and just being. But it can also be an opportunity to show us what we do instead of how we be.
Mm.
And let us look at noticing, do I really need to keep doing this? Is that what's really going on right now? Or am I assuming something about the other person? And if I'm assuming something about the other person, how can I know if it's true or not? Well, I can check. I said you had, for example, I was noticing you had white hair. I was afraid to hurt your feelings. Did I hurt
You
your
actually
feelings?
did, Miriam, when
Yes.
you said that about me.
Well, with you,
You
I
know,
said it with white hair because on my screen it looks like your hair is white.
this
So
is
because it
a
felt very sort of, I don't want people to see my white hair today, and now I feel really visible, and I didn't want people to notice that, and so we could have a dialogue about what's going on right now between the two of us.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. There's a sound. Is it the dog? It stopped just for a moment. Do you hear it, Jen? Not now. Now. Not now.
yeah, it's the
Now.
dog.
It's the dog. Okay. I just wanted to check.
Well, it's actually me petting the dog. So.
It's me petting the dog. It sounded like, because it's going. Could you please
Good to know
not pet the dog?
my mic is extremely sensitive, I guess.
It certainly is.
Well, it's lovely that you have the dog there, but there's also a noise. So just so you know.
I'll behave accordingly.
Oh.
You know, these questions that you went through in this exercise is so cool, because in hypnotherapy, as I'm working with a client and doing a regression, so I would maybe, in the case of trauma, take them back to the traumatic event and have them view it and relive it as though it's a movie, and they have the opportunity to watch themselves. And as we're going through that process, those are the exact questions that I'm asking them in trance. And in that context, I'm using those questions and words and observations to bring them deeper into trance, orienting questions. What are you noticing? Where are you now? Are you alone or with others? Is it night or day? How are you feeling? And all of those questions just bring them more into the present, and the present in this case being the hypnotic journey that we are co-creating together. And I find it's also very useful in the context of in moments when I'm getting overwhelmed. like earlier, 20 minutes ago, half an hour ago, when I was having the technical difficulties, I felt an enormous amount of anxiety, maybe a little bit too strong, but I'll go ahead with that. I felt a lot of anxiety welling up inside of me because of just pressure that I'm putting on myself, going, oh no, I'm going to be the one that's screwing this up. And, our show's not going to go off on time and it's my fault. And when we experience those things, when we feel, and I felt myself getting a little non-grounded, non-centered, and starting to time travel, worried about, am I going to adversely affect the show? And why didn't I get on 10 minutes earlier and check and make sure and give myself, so there's just a lot of that dialogue. And when we notice that our thoughts are beginning to hijack our experience, it can also be a useful exercise to just tune into ourselves and notice, what are you noticing? Well, I'm in my house. I've got my dogs. I'm safe. You guys are competent. The show will go on with or without me. It's going to be okay. And just going through that exercise just brought my own internal experience down calmly enough that I was able to go through without all of the mental static keeping me from accessing the resources that hopefully would have solved the problem, which eventually it did, because it ultimately occurred to me, I can just do this on my phone. I don't need to do it on the laptop.
Yeah.
So there, I find those types of questions, the way that you're using them interpersonally is a whole new way that I've never even thought of before. But just those orienting questions to bring you back to the moment, to now, very, very powerful. And I tend to find small hinges. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have some opportunities to play together, even not on outside the Posse talks. It's an excellent way to train presence.
Yeah.
Because as far as, again, since the topic is partially connected to trauma, I will bring that back to trauma. Not because I'm fixated on trauma, but because it's the topic. I do work a lot with trauma. But the fact of the matter is that very many of us who have experienced trauma will experience challenges in interpersonal relationships. And so training this way, where we're noticing actually completely concrete things without making any kind of judgment or evaluation or assumptions or anything at all, but just noticing what's really there concretely, can be a great resource because it brings it's very present activity. Without all the thoughts and the judgments and the assumptions and everything, I don't time travel, as you call it. I don't fly into forward and backward. I don't have to fear anything that's not happening, that's only happening in my head. And when I'm very concrete, I can notice when I'm not concrete. It's a training, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The more I am concrete, the more I notice when I'm not. And a lot of times when I do this kind of work with people, and we do a lot of this noticing, just noticing and not answering, not responding, but also training with the response. When I hear you say that, I'm noticing and then give a response. I'm noticing I feel angry, for example, or I'm noticing I feel embarrassed, or I'm noticing I'm getting dry in my mouth or something. That kind of, again, concrete response allows me to pick up on when I start wandering and bring myself back. And people will not necessarily recognize how useful and important it is, how worthwhile it is, because they think, oh, it's so dry, it's so controlling, you're policing my language. There are a lot of protests that will come up. It's like, that's actually none of those things. I'm not doing any of those things. What I'm inviting you to do is to stay here and describe as concretely as possible what you notice. And then you will learn the value of that. And once that training is incorporated, I mean, I do it, it's part of my life, part of the way I live. It's very easy to notice when I'm not present, or when I'm less present, or when I'm with someone who isn't And what I will notice is someone who isn't able to be very present, it's very hard for me to connect from the level I'm at. I have to come up to where they are vibrationally and then see if I can bring them down with me. And that's also a part of training. I can vibrate to your frequency, which is fear, for example, and I can also see if you can come down to my vibrational frequency, which is presence. So it's a fantastic way to train with people, but they can feel very frustrated and limited, and especially if you're used to a lot of chaos and action, because chaos can be very exciting.
Yeah.
So, but it's not necessarily productive, but it's exciting. So that's an opportunity to come into presence, noticing where trauma takes me, for example.
So I have a question. When you were doing the exercise with Jan, you were guiding her away from having a judgment about what it was that she was noticing. And I like that a lot. It's just different from the way that I do it. I'm interested in exploring whatever feelings may be arising in them and using that. But I can see, particularly if this is not something that we're doing through trance work, releasing that need that we have to judge everything and create hierarchies and structures. As we eliminate that, is it your experience that helps people come into a pure presence? Pure is not the word I want to use, but just when we are the awake observer that is noticing what's going on without the need to judge, that feels like it would bring one into a more centered and grounded state even more quickly. So long way of asking, is that your experience, and is that part of the technique that you're using?
Part of it, yes, and yes. Part of the technique is everything is present. When I'm noticing what's going on, if I'm noticing I'm in the future, if I'm noticing I'm thinking, for example, fearing something that I'm telling myself might happen, that is now the present moment. That is my present. So I'm noticing that I'm thinking this, and I'm noticing it's creating tension in my body. I'm noticing, for example, my stomach, there's tension in my stomach and my stomach muscles are drawing in. I'm noticing and I'm noticing and I'm noticing. All of that is present. So I'm noticing from moment to moment. And as I notice, I'm also giving myself agency, sovereignty, right? I am in control. I am the one who decides. So as I'm noticing that I'm thinking what I'm thinking and what it's doing, what I'm doing in my body with this thought, I can also choose to release the thought. If I'm having, I call an interpretation of something instead of using judgment, just because some people may think of judgment as a negative word, whereas interpretation is much, do you notice what happened in your body? Interpretation is much,
totally.
And so that's a part of it as well. Which word do I choose? And some people will, as I mentioned before, experience that as policing. You're trying to control the way I speak. You're trying to police my words. And I'm not doing that at all. I'm actually inviting you to feel the difference and put whatever word feels most clean and honest, resonates most correctly with your experience right now. And perhaps it is judgment, and perhaps it's interpretation. But what happens in you when you feel into both of those? Or assumption, or whatever it is. So
well, so just that little shift, because I don't really have, I don't think, a strong trigger around the word judgment, or I think of it almost as discernment, which still has got a little bit more energy than interpret, which feels about as neutral as one could get, and is far away from a trigger that may be installed in a client's mind. And it just seems like making that shift in the person and saying, as you go from feeling the need to judge to just releasing the need to interpret and just be a witness, what's happening inside of you. Those are good little self-inquiry points that you can use just to calibrate your own internal experience, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I like to do is work on the I feel angry parts, because angry is for many people a kind of a complicated thing, and it seems to very often be an opportunity to focus on the other person. And in this case, when the interpersonal part of the noticing, I will often also have an exercise where I invite people to notice how much of their attention is on themselves and how much is on the other person as they sit with the other person. And a lot of people who are very sort of trauma controlled will notice that they're about 80% focused on the other person and 20% on themselves, because they're hyper vigilant. Yeah, I notice you smiling and nodding, Jan. It's that experience of you have to be on guard. You have to be in control, for example. Not you, Jan, just you in general.
Yeah.
People who have that experience, and where the invitation is, okay, what happens if you are 60% on the other person and 40% on yourself? Or are you able to be 80% on yourself and 20% on the other person? And this comes in handy, for example, when it comes to anger, because very often the phrase is, you make me angry. Right? And in trauma or no trauma, the phrase is very often, you make me angry.
Right.
And I will often ask the question, are you sure about that? Or another one, how do you know? How do you know that the other person is making you angry? And there will often be depending on the trauma, again, this is an opportunity to see what happens. Does the person go into shame, into self-defense, or is the person able to stay present and feel into, yeah, how do I know? What's going on? It's because I was thinking this and blaming the other person, for example. That's a very sort of present. Or, well, I said this and the other person didn't hear me. And I've said it so many times and you're not listening. And so I'm angry. You make me angry. I was like, oh, so your expectation perhaps is that the other person should hear you at all times just because you speak. Could that be true? And if again, watch whether the other person goes into defensiveness or shame or more anger or fear or whatever. Yeah. Or can stay present and, okay, you might be onto something. Let me see if that resonates. And then explore every moment of that. I'm noticing movement in my chest now. I'm noticing this pressure coming up towards my throat. I feel like I feel angry with you because you said that and I want to hide from it. I'm noticing, and then just keep noticing and keep noticing and keep owning. We talk about owning. Own your experience, take responsibility for your experience, and don't blame everybody else for it. It's my experience, so it is mine to own. So if I feel angry, I feel angry. How do I know the other person is making me angry? That assumes I'm telepathic and know what their intention is. And even if they are intending to make me angry, do I have to play along with that? If I'm present, I may notice that they may be trying to goad me or something, manipulate me, and I just notice it.
Right.
And it has no effect other than that I just notice it, and I'm still present and honest with my own experience and speaking from myself. Where does my attention go? Does it go over to the other, or does it stay with me in relation to the other? Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that more enlightening, or is it confusing?
No.
I like it a lot. And to me, when we shift from you make me angry That to me is the syntax of victimhood. You make me angry. That means I'm experiencing an effect and you are the cause. And as we shift to I am angry or I'm experiencing anger, those will have little bit of a different thing, because I am, now we're identifying at the level of our constructed identity, our egoic self. When we say I am experiencing anger, it's just kind of that it arises. And for me, at least, that there's a shift there. And, it's less impactful to my current experience if I am just thinking that anger is arising within me and getting curious. There's a stimulus that's out there and I'm responding. But as I realize I have lots of different responses that I could make based on that stimulus, then that just creates a little bit more flexibility and gets me less locked into the story.
Yeah. And actually, noticing some words that I noticed my attention going to some words. One of them was victim. The other one was, there was something about anger. But victim can often be a word where judgment is attached to it.
Very much so.
Whereas victim for me is an indication of a need for something. So I don't have to put a judgment on it. It's not good or bad. It is actually an opportunity. This is the trauma as opportunity. Everything that arises, all of the thoughts, all of the assumptions, all of the fears, the reactions, fight, flight, freeze, hypotonic, they're all opportunities to tell me something, show me something about myself. Show me something about myself in relation to another, in relation to my past as well, or my future. On myself. Who do I think I am? Do I think I'm weak? Is that what happens? Is that why I feel overwhelmed? Because I think I can't handle it. Okay, what's in that? Why? Why do I tell myself that I can't handle it? Where is that coming from? If I couldn't handle something when I was 3, but I'm 53, how is that comparable? It isn't. But I might not notice that I've been carrying that and doing that same habit, repetition, for 50 years. And once I start noticing it, I realize, wait a minute, I'm not weak now. I felt weak in that situation. I felt out of control. But right now, who am I now? What's going on now? I'm afraid to feel out of control. But am I out of control? So again, every moment, everything I notice is an opportunity to learn something and free myself from something and be more with something. In that respect, every relationship I have can improve in some way, or I release it and let it go. And in that case, it is also an improvement. Everything I meet in life is enlivened because I notice it. As I notice it and am with it, it becomes more alive. And I become more present. I don't have to run from things. I don't have to react to things. All of that, any kind of response that is connected to a trauma can invite me to be more present as I notice that it is connected to a past trauma, not present trauma. If it is a present traumatic experience and I need to run, then I need to run. I don't need to be sitting meditating on what I feel right now. It is appropriate for my body to take over, shut my language system down, for example, and get my arms and legs moving so I can get away, for example. But in absence of trauma, as you mentioned before, sitting and noticing that, there are 2 lights in the ceiling and one over there. I'm looking at 2 people along with me on a StreamYard broadcast, etc., etc. brings me more into what is right now and makes it very obvious when I'm putting something in it, like I'm in danger. I'm sitting with two other people. I'm talking. Nobody else is in the room physically with me right now. Why do I feel like I'm in danger, for example?
Right.
What am I telling myself somewhere? Or what am I not getting a hold of that I'm telling myself? Now, I don't actually feel fear now. I just wanted to bring that up as an example. I have actually had trouble with stage fright before. I don't have it now. But it was an opportunity again, an opportunity to let myself know what's going on and how I can change the way I see myself in the world and how I see the world and how I experience myself in the world and how I experience the world, including other people. So it's all an opportunity. It also allows me, as I am with myself, to be more aware of others.
Mm.
I feel pain. That means I'm more aware that other people can feel pain. So it awakens compassion and love and the ability to be with another person's pain without being overwhelmed by it or going into it and taking it over. Have you ever noticed that happens sometimes? Somebody starts crying and then somebody else starts crying.
Yeah.
And they're not the ones in pain, but they're kind of taking over. It becomes not necessary. It doesn't happen because it's not mine. And that is, again, an opportunity. Why am I crying? Why am I crying? Okay, let me look at this. Let me be with it. Wait, it's not mine. So
Another
I noticed you
company.
nodding and smiling, Jan. I'm just curious what's going on with you over there.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm just taking it all in. I'm loving everything that you guys are saying. This whole IU business is fascinating. It comes up for me as a mediator, working through conflict with people and trying to find resolutions. And that's one of the tools that I give people is I statements. Because when you own what's going on for you, it's very difficult for somebody else to argue with that. You're owning it, it's yours. It's not you're doing this to me. It's when, you show up in this way, I feel this way, and this is what happens in me. And I know that that's very powerful in other scenarios. So it's interesting to hear it here. And the whole victim thing, and judgment and interpretation and assumptions and time traveling, and especially when it's all linked to trauma. When you were speaking earlier, it was as if you were speaking to me because I've had some trauma come up for me recently, and my trauma tends to be around abandon rather than anger, but not pleasant any all the same. And it's been exactly what you were describing. It's just wave after wave of just being present with whatever is being thrown up and owning it and being with it and knowing where it's coming from, and just allowing it to do whatever it needs to do and pass, but not jumping all over it and, getting into justification and, whipping it up even more, but just staying with it and noticing it and watching it, just play out is what helps it pass. But even when it passes, another wave will come and then you're being with it again. So, it is like building that muscle. And I loved what you said earlier about, when we spend more time in presence, we become very sensitive to when we're not.
Mm.
And I know my tolerance for not being present is really low now. And I feel it, and I feel it hard when I'm not present, and when I do go time traveling. But every emotion, whether it's anger or shame or guilt, whatever, every emotion is love in disguise. Every emotion that we don't like is trying to call us home to who we are.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
single one of them. And
Yeah.
that's what keeps me going when my trauma comes up for me. And, every time something happens and I go through this, I think I'm through it. I've dealt with it. I'm over it. I've let that story go. And then lo and behold, something else will happen months or years later and another wave of it comes up. And, that plays out. But, it's all okay. We're built to hold space for it all. And I keep coming back to the sky. The sky holds space for birds and airplanes and weather systems and everything else. And our conscious awareness can hold space for whatever emotion arises within us. We're built to hold space for it all and to allow it all to pass on through us. But it's not us. And if we can just leave it alone and be with it and notice it, and it does pass on, and a lot faster, even though never as fast as we might like. For me anyway. But it does pass. And it's the presence. That's the beacon. That's the light at the end of the tunnel for me. Is I know that the more present I am, the more at home, the more time I'm spending at home, and the less time I'm time traveling. Because when this comes up for me, I don't like how I feel, and I know that the best thing to do is to be as present as I can.
Man, I love that.
It really is the power of presence.
Yeah.
So
I have a brief story that I would like to share that I think plays into that, and I love that. I'm going to hijack. I'll quote you on it, Jan. That every emotion that shows up for us is love in disguise, and it's an invitation to return back home again. I'm not sure whether I may have shared this on a previous podcast, but we're diving into it again. I had a coaching client that I had worked with for a couple of years who got arrested and was in jail. And one day I get a call, and it's a collect call from the such and such county correctional facility. Will I accept the charges? And I said, yep. And my client comes on totally freaking out. He is in jail. He is in with mostly a criminal population, and he was a older gentleman who had got caught up in a drug deal, and he was not a drug dealer. He was just doing this to help out what he perceived to be a friend, and got arrested. It was an undercover cop, and he was freaking out. He was crying. He was scared. His voice was shaking. And we had to do calls 9 to 11 minutes. That's all you're allowed. And then the phone cuts off. And if somebody else is in line, the next person gets. If nobody else is in line, he can call back and get another 9 minutes. And we did a series of these 9-minute coaching calls. The first two, I think, were me just saying, how are you doing right now? And I had worked with him on time traveling a lot, so he understood that language. And he was going back to say, oh God, it was such a stupid mistake, and I don't know what I was thinking, and I guess I was just thinking blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, how are you doing right now? Right now you're talking to me on the phone. And I just kept guiding him back, and he goes, I'm freaking out. How do you think I'm doing? I'm in here with a bunch of hardened criminals. I have no idea what's going to happen tonight or tomorrow. This could be really bad for me. And I got that. I understand that. How are you doing right now? And it took a while to just bring him back. And eventually he got to the point where he was like, I'm doing fine right now. I'm doing what I do all the time. I'm talking to my coach, and he's bringing me back into the present moment. And you could, like, if the calls had been, well, they were actually recorded. I don't have access to the recordings, but the correctional facility does. You could just hear, it was though you could hear in the tone of his voice that his blood pressure was just returning to a more natural state. And people who are still living with past traumas, that hypervigilance that you mentioned, Miriam, is ever present with them. They're on this heightened state. Their mental static is there. And I love in working with a client when I get to the point where I can say, what you're trying to get over is over. It's only staying alive because you keep telling the story. And through trance, as we go back and revisit those things, we do it in a different way. And from a hypnotherapeutic standpoint, one of our presumptions is that if this is still occurring, there must be a lesson to learn that hasn't been learned yet, or an action to take that hasn't been taken yet, or an insight that just hasn't been fully realized yet. And once those happen, it's very common that the memory is still there and the lesson is still there, but the emotional charge to that experience, it just seems like it's been grounded.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a interesting
Beautiful.
little metaphor. Yeah.
That was lovely, beautiful. And
Gorgeous.
yes, exactly. It's the lesson is there. There's a lesson in it, and that things stick around perhaps because we need to learn. And maybe even the thing we need to learn is that we're keeping it alive.
Yeah.
And that we perhaps are trying to avoid something by keeping it alive. There could be, I remember when I actually learned that I was being loyal to my parents, I was keeping something alive. And it was because I was being loyal to my parents who, for example, didn't always have my best interests at heart. Didn't always like me to be happy if they weren't feeling good at the time. So when I realized that I was being loyal and that meant actually not living my best life, I could stop. I didn't have to be loyal to them anymore. And then I could start living my best life. So that's an example of that. Since we're running out of time, we started a little bit late, but I think even so that we don't go very much over time. I just want to mention about this idea, and Jen, the way you described it was so beautiful as well. I'm not as eloquent, so I kind of tend to be brutally cutting to the chase. When we feel fear, and I deal with people who sometimes have debilitating, overwhelming fear, and they go into complete lockdown. And what is natural to do then in any kind of situation as well? I mean, if it was a physical pain, it's natural for us to want to stop the pain, right? If somebody hammered a nail into my hand, I want to take the nail out because I think that will stop the pain. So if I'm in some sort of emotional overwhelm, it's quite painful. And so I want to stop the pain. And what the presence training does and the opportunity with trauma is to not focus on stopping the fear, not focus on stopping the pain, but to be with it and allow it to move. Not focus on it. Focus on, as you're also describing, Bobby, how am I right now? Okay, I may have, somebody's actually hammered a nail into my hand. Well, my hand hurts and I'm in a beautiful room and I feel warm and comfortable. I'm not freezing. I have water, a bit thirsty. I'd like to drink, etc., etc. There's so much more than just the pain. And the training is, and it is training. The training is to be able to stay again present to more than the pain, to allow the pain to just move and not take us over. And I would imagine, Bobby, as you work with hypnosis, you know that it's possible to not even feel pain. I've had people stick needles in me, and I've had quite invasive surgical procedures without painkillers, without anesthesia or anything. And it's been painless, completely painless. So there is this impulse to focus on stopping the emotion that feels painful, stopping the discomfort instead of allowing it. And the presence work becomes noticing what else is going on. It's not just the pain. There's way more. As I say, when I'm with Jan, as I sit here with you, I'm noticing not only you have white hair, there are many things I'm noticing. You have two eyes, you have a nose, you're smiling right now. Or if I want to be even more specific, the corners of your mouth are turning upwards. I can see your teeth. Here you go. Yeah. And then I'm hearing this sound it sounds like laughter, etc., etc. There's way more going on. And that's part of the training, the opportunity to take in more than the discomfort and allow the discomfort to be there without it taking me over. Again, how much of my attention is on the discomfort and how much of the attention is on me and what is, which is so much more than the discomfort. because I may not be able to choose the discomfort, but I can choose everything else.
Mm.
So that was a lot of information. And we've
Beautiful.
gone over time.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. It has been a bit of a whirlwind quickie because of the technical issues. And I see that it looks like, now I'm going to make an assumption here or an interpretation. It looks like you're thinking, Bobby, but we don't really have time to talk more.
Well, the thinking will no doubt continue after we're gone. So that
We are present to our thoughts. I do thank you both. And I'm very happy that we managed to solve the technical issues. And perhaps if this is an interesting topic, then we can have a part 2, as we have done before with other topics, where we can explore even more in-depthly and other sides of it. In-depthly, we don't say that, in-depth. Yeah. But we'll see. Maybe we can get some of the other Posse members on to bring in their perspective. We got a neuro guy who has a lot of cool things to say. So I'd like to hear his perspective, for example. But as is now, Jan and Bobby, I thank you very much for being with me on this topic. And all of you, those of you who are watching, thank you for participating. And we will get the time change. Well, it's not quite in alignment for all the countries at the same time, but in a few weeks, we'll all pretty much be in the same place. And everybody will be able to figure out that we're back and we're predictable. So again, thanks for that as well.
We fall back next weekend. So hopefully
you fall back. Yeah, you fall back next week. And I've already fallen back.
Yeah.
Oh. So see you all next week. The Presence Posse will present a new topic. Thanks, everybody, and take good care.